difficult. I call it re-entry, if you will, into a normal schedule that's unlike the schedule we've been on. It's hard because there's something addicting to preparing each week, and especially when you get into the postseason. So, we'll go through the next 2.5 weeks where we'll evaluate our team, which I think is very important, our staff, and then eventually move on to free agency and the league schedule. Any questions at this time?
Coach, when we talked to the players after the loss, a lot of them said that, this is the new standard because you reached the playoffs. How does that now manifest itself moving forward? Because you kind of had to wade through a lot of other stuff that wasn't your, the no playoff berths, no winning seasons. How does that now change as you move forward? If that's the new standard.
Well, I think obviously we're in an extremely competitive market. When I say that, the league, and it has to be that way. It has to be thought of that way. Like we know we're in the entertainment business, but we're also in the business of winning, and so I like hearing that from a player, and we got to continue to build on that. There's nothing that's ever promised, that always happens from one year to the next. Well, it was this, then it's nothing's promised that way. That's something that you literally never pick up from where you left off. You break everything back down to rubble and you start again, and that's what we plan on doing. We have more information now relative to where we are as a team. There's a few important pieces, obviously, that will help us in a direction as we move towards the 2025 season. But that's kind of how it starts.
Sean, obviously only one team is happy at the end of the season, but you kind of talked about learning about the roster, what you have. In regards to the team maximizing its skills and reaching its potential, how would you classify this season, and was it a success?
Look, I think you can define success in so many different ways. Look, was it a team I was proud of and we were proud of? Yes. These guys fought. They came together. Like most teams in our league, hit stretches of adversity, bounced back. So there were a lot of positives to build on, and yet it still was disappointing to finish the way we did. I didn't think we played up to our potential in the last game. We talked already a little bit about that, and so you said it at the very beginning. There's one team, when the season ends, they all have their final team meeting, exit interviews, but there's one team that's really excited, and so there's that taste left in your mouth of wanting to get started right away, and avoid avoid that feeling we had this past weekend, and I think, look, I think our players understand that. There'll be a time here where they get away. The calendar's already done. There's 2 calendars we typically work from. The A calendar takes us all the way through the off season. It takes us all the way to the start of training camp. That's finished. That's already done. And then the B calendar is the calendar, once we get the schedule, that takes us through the end of the season to today. Yesterday we finished the A calendar all the way through draft, off-season program, all the way up to training camp. Yeah, that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, Sean, it sounds like expectations adjusted as the season went along. In the beginning, there weren't much expectations for your team. 5.5 wins,
Yeah.
bad roster.
Are we talking about your expectations or ours?
I guess the odds makers put the.
I have no interest in their expectations. I say that respectfully. I have no interest.
The
Zero.
dead cap was probably the reason that you took on the number one dead cap was probably the reason why there was.
There was a
some
lot of
doubt.
reasons, though. It wasn't just the cap. I mean, you pay attention to some of it, but we didn't have a quarterback. We didn't have this. We didn't have that. I get it. Those people are paid to create content. They have a job, but oftentimes it's just that.
Were you gratified though that you
No, let me finish. You started with the question, and I would say I don't think that existed internally. I think that was more of an external expectations, which they are what they are. Those are the same expectations or the same. There's that bus again that's traveling that everyone's listening to that tells us how good this player is in the draft or how good he isn't. We don't know who's driving it. It's an invisible driver, but somehow we end up listening to it or letting it affect sometimes our opinions on topics. I think, look, in seriousness to what you're asking, I think early on you don't know what you have as a team. I get asked that all the time. How's your team going to be? I'm like, man, I'm anxious to see. And I think that early stretch of the season, bouncing back, was extremely important. And I think coming back from that Eastern swing, and then there's a stretch we win 4 or 5 in a row here. It's an evolving thing that took place, and that was good to see. There's confidence that's built with that, but the other stuff, the outside noise, whatever.
Sean, I'm hoping you could discuss what you think some of your off-season needs are, and I'm hoping you can address at running back. Do you think you need a bell cow type of running back versus just by committee?
Let's start with that one. I don't know that we ever found that right. I understand the committee. I'm used to having 2. We're going to have more than just one back. We're gonna stack that position group. It's too hard in our league to play with just one. Rarely does a team do it. Occasionally it happens. And certainly we'll have a chance to evaluate when we get to the off-season evaluation process, like where we feel like we're at with each position. Certainly that's an important position. I'm not ready today to give you our must needs and wants. That we're 2 weeks away, and even 2 weeks from now, I'm still not going to give them to you. All right. But we'll go through that process, and we'll look closely at what we think we still need, what we have to have, and then what we want to have. That only comes after evaluating our own roster. We're just not there yet.
Coach, after having an entire season to watch Bo, how do you think his rookie season went, and what jump do you want him to take from year 1 to year 2?
Yeah, I think, look, there are a lot of things to be encouraged about. I had a good visit with him yesterday. His movement skills, some of the things maybe that we didn't even see or forecast coming. His decision making, he's extremely accurate. I've said this before, he's hard to sack. And that's a good trait to have in our league. And then there are things that, he's going to look at and grow from and build on, whether it's third down snaps, whether it's pressure snaps. But I'm real encouraged, and I'm glad that he's with us, and that it worked out the way it did. I know this. He's very conscientious. He comes in, he spends a lot of time here. He was here in my office for half an hour yesterday. Yeah, I think it's all in front of him, and I've said this before. I think we found, that player that can lead us, and be what we need relative to having the success we're used to having. I think we found it.
Sean, a bit of a philosophical question here. When we talk about your culture and the standard, it's very clear when we talk to your players that they're aware of what that is. Words I feel like they use a lot: toughness, accountability. Mike McGlinchey talks a lot about camaraderie and how key that was. So I'm curious, as you head into the offseason, both in free agency and the draft, the mental side of players. You know what you want physically. How do you identify that?
It's a great question. I said to him that gets discussed in the last team meeting, and my message wasn't for the players. I looked up to the second row, and there's scouts, there's personnel people, there's various people. I said, coaches as well. The locker room, that discussion for every player we choose to bring in. In other words, and I brought up an example with Streif. We drafted a player in New Orleans that was borderline makeup. It didn't work out, and Streif was close enough to me then. He was a player. He said, "What were you thinking?" And I just felt like a dope. What was I thinking? I knew better. So in that last meeting, I brought that up to them. That what's going to be brought in here is going to be discussed as to the fit. We owe that to that room. And so that's extremely important.
Coach, you've talked about this rookie class before and your expectations coming into the season. Just wondering how you thought as a group they performed and how much of a foundational piece they can be moving forward.
Yeah, again, I think in 3 years we always get that. I feel like 3 years is a fair time, but a lot of them contributed, and so that's encouraging, real encouraging. But I think in 2 more seasons we'll have a chance to look at the whole group. Look at the beginning, we all said the grade of that class would have to start with how well the QB did. But honestly, the other players, we'll still have a better feel for in the next couple of years.
Hey, Sean, I want to piggyback on Zach's question earlier and ask you a two-parter.
Yeah.
One is, do you subscribe to the notion that the first offseason in a rookie quarterback's career is integral, most important? And secondly, in what ways would this offseason be integral to both?
I think it's important. I don't think it's the most important offseason for all. No. So I would say no to the do I subscribe to. I subscribe to every one of those off seasons is important in their growth. They do have a much better handle, all right, as to, man, the tempo of the game's faster. It's just quicker between plays. The college game can go on forever. And so the in and out, up and down, on and off, in the huddle, in and out, up and down, on and off, that is so much quicker in our league than it is in college. And so that's an adjustment. And then the speed of the defenses, the disguise of the defenses, in college you might get a little tilt and then a rotation. In our league you might get a safety that's, in the D gap that'll end up. And so the complexity of third down, and look, the college game does a great job with it. But it's much different, much faster in our game. And so now you get that deep breath and you're like, all right, this is what it's like. But I think I think the next 2, 3, 4 years, those are all important steps. I know he's going to be here quite a bit. Once again, the injury data, I could give you the graph. I think 32 teams a year ago, we finished first. This year, we're currently second from the, I don't want to use the wrong word, but from from what was taking place prior. All right. And that's a credit to Bo Lowry. It's a credit to the training room, the strength and development. It's a credit to everyone involved. And, you know, that there's a lot that goes into that. And then if you're finishing towards the bottom, there's a lot that goes into that too. And you've earned that. And I know Greg, everyone involved in the process is really excited, because here's the thing. You're also selling to your players, and now your players are wanting to be here for the recovery. They want to be here for the off season. They want to be here lifting. They want to be here. They're not all disappearing to the satellite private workout expert facilities that are supposedly that they're staying here, and there's more than a year of proof. There's 2 years of proof, and for those prior that it didn't work out so well for, tough. That's just what it was. They earned those numbers. When you have 134 players miss games because of injury, something's wrong. And then when you have 30-something 2 years in a row, something's right. And so that takes me, I think, to your question as to players being here and wanting to be here and feeling like I'm benefiting from my training here. And when you could put those numbers up, that's pretty substantial.
Sean, you talk a lot about sort of the matchup player, the joker player offensively. Yeah. Do you think you have candidates to really be that guy on your roster currently?
Fair question.
And then also, how much can that sort of, help Bo and yourself as a play caller unlock offensively?
Well, I know how much it can help. And it's not until you don't have them. I've said this before. Early on as a coach, when you're just coaching and you have your players, I remember the selection of Reggie Bush and the owner asking me, well, we already have Deuce McAllister, who was a real good running back. And I said, well, Mr. Benson, the late Mr. Benson, this running back's different. He can do these things. And we talked about it. It was a good question, but that was the first exposure at this level for me as a head coach, where we had Tiki Barber when I was at the Giants. There was a joker-type player. Jeremy Shockey was a joker-type player. Jason Witten was a joker-type player early in his career. And so then pretty soon, we had Shockey, then Jimmy Graham, then Darren Sproles, then Kamara, and I didn't really appreciate it at the time, but in that stretch, we went through a stretch of 15 or 16 seasons with real like high-end offenses that maybe didn't have a receiver get to a Pro Bowl, but those other spots did. And I think in our league, when you look around and you reference, just take some of the top teams, you'll always remember Kelsey with the Chiefs. I don't know that you remember the receivers sometimes, maybe through that Super Bowl run, maybe so. Do I think we have some candidates? Yeah. But that inner triangle of attacking a defense is real important.
Sean, going back to Bo and his offseason, any rookie's offseason is so different coming into the league and not knowing where they're going versus now having a set home.
Yeah.
What kind of input do you have about how he should approach between now and when they get back in here in April as a team? And does he talk to guys like Drew Brees or other people he might point him towards?
He'll have a schedule. I think guys like him, that he already has the schedule. Like, he's got the calendar from us, and he's already kind of knows this is where I'm going to be, this is where I'm going to go, and it'll be pretty organized. It'll be pretty laid out, and it'll be one in which. Here's the thing. Part of the growth and development is the willingness of the person, and someone like him who's really wanting to be a sponge and gather that information, and all of that is extremely positive. So, Yeah, I think that's just in his DNA. Like, you know, like his aspirations for himself and for his team have to be higher than anyone else's, and I think that's the case.
John, I'm curious, just in general, when you step back from it, you face 3 of the 4 teams left in the AFC playoffs. Do you see a gap between you and them, or how do you look at it?
Oh, I'm telling you what, I didn't see a gap last weekend until the second half, and then you see a gap because you're losing, but I felt real confident we'd go in there and play well and win. We obviously didn't play well enough, but those lines are much finer than we think. You know, I use that term, there's a fine line between a groove and a rut. And it's a player, it's 2 players, it's the line of scrimmage, it's the kicking game. So we're not looking backwards, we're looking ahead, and it starts with the division, you know, and there's a lot of confidence in this team. If we could get past that game, the next game we had to play, we felt real good about. And so we're still not there yet, and yet we're a lot closer than we were at this time a year ago. That was misery, sorrow, drudgery. Give me some other adjectives there. Just, God, that was brutal.